Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zen Curious. I'm Kira Hanselman, and I'm joined with my co-host, Lauren Tancredi. Today we're talking about one of life's toughest teachers, judgment. We're going to explore how judgment, whether it's directed out at ourselves or others, often reveals some deeper insecurities and unmet needs. You're going to hear stories from our own lives about how we struggle with self-criticism and navigating the pressure to meet certain expectations. We'll also talk about how to transform judgment into an opportunity for some self-reflection and growth, shifting from a place of criticism to one of compassion. And don't forget about our free 7-day awareness challenge. This is available on our website, thezencurious.com, or you can find a link to download that workbook in the show notes. This is a great way to start peeling back the layers of conditioning and embracing a more mindful approach to life. The journey begins now. Welcome to the Zen Curious.
All right, so we're back, and today we're going to talk about one of my biggest teachers, and it's been judgment. And so as a woman who grew up with a father who is now a federal judge, you can imagine the lessons that I've experienced around judgment in my life. And I think that there's a quote from Earl Nightingale that says, when you judge others, you don't define them, you're actually defining yourself. And this has been a huge teacher because it's like, you can point one finger at you, but there's still three pointing back at, or pointing at somebody else, and there's still three pointing back at you.
Yep.
Right? And so what is judgment showing up as a teacher for us as we become more aware and we try and find this component of peace, right? From the Zen Curious perspective. And so as we acknowledge these feelings that are showing up around ourselves and possibly others as it relates to judgment, and we're on this path to discovering a peace, like, what's the lesson in it for us?
Yeah, I mean, judgment is something that I think creates a lot of unrest, right? So when seeking peace in our lives, it's a great place to start. Most of the time when judgment shows up in my life, it's really, if I can be present enough to be with what's happening, it's really a mirror of, what's happening inside of me. Usually illuminating some insecurities or fears that I have. I see this a lot. This is an example that's coming to mind, but when I'm on social media and certain people are posting stuff and I'm seeing their stuff and I hear the voice in my head like passing judgment on them or being like, oh, that's really dumb, or I can't believe they posted that. And it's like what I mean, sitting here talking about it, it's like most of the time I'm doing that because they're free enough to be showing up as who they are without filtering themselves for what other people might, I don't know, what other people care or think. Most of the time when I'm looking at stuff like that, I mean, there's other ways on Instagram or social media that things come up, but I'm like, ooh, I can't believe they did that.
Right.
They're just not afraid. They're not afraid to show up as themselves.
Uninhibited, full of self-expression, maybe authenticity, maybe not, right? We don't know. We don't know what people are operating from.
True.
And at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know anything, right? We're not walking in that person's shoes. And so when we're in this place of judgment, a lot of times it's to contextualize our reality, right? To make sense or understand like what might be happening in the world around us. And so can it serve as a purpose? But oftentimes when we think about judgment, it's this place of like superiority, right? Like we're far more superior than somebody. Maybe we're more awake, right? And so our passing judgment is almost like belittling or condescending or counterintuitive to like the expression of love, which is what we're here for, or the path to peace is what we're talking about here, right? And so it's interesting because if we look at judgment as an invitation or a teacher for us, it's like, what is it here to teach us? And so oftentimes, I know in my own personal experience, like, yes, I judge other people, but I would say like I am my own worst critic. right? And so, again, growing up with a father who was a lawyer most of my life and then recently became a federal judge, I think like 6 or 7 years ago now. I think he's halfway through his term. And one of my earliest conditionings or beliefs was people are watching me.
Mm.
And that it's a reflection of how he's raising his kids, how I'm behaving in the world. So there was things like I couldn't wear certain clothing. I had to wear my Sunday best every time we went to church. And there was like this facade that we had to show up in or put on in order to appear a particular way because of fear that my father would be judged or criticized or not be able to make it in his career. And so, you know, for me, what happened was I created a lot of social anxiety as a child, right? And so I landed up being medicated and institutionalized and almost taking my life. And like, you know, there's a lot of pressure that I put on myself, kind of to your point around Instagram, like because I was constantly in comparison, right? Comparison of what I thought I needed to be based upon this societal conditioning and parenting from my parents who absolutely were doing the best that they could, right, with the tools that they had. And also, like, it didn't allow me to stay in my own fucking lane at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? I felt like I had to be somebody or do something or prove myself. And a lot of the narrative that lived in my head was what I should be doing.
Should it all over yourself.
I should all over my freaking self, which doesn't feel good when you're constantly in a state of anxiety thinking that you have to be somebody other than who you are.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was easy to like see things that were out external to me or other people and be in judgment of them, whether it's like how they were behaving or performing, because there was part of me that was insecure to do it for myself based upon like the conditioning of my reality and the voices in my head. I was talking to your husband this morning and I was telling him, like, you know, the first time that I actually realized like that the voice in my head could be turned off.
Yeah. Or reasoned with or talked to or
right, or just
any
like,
of the above.
Acknowledged, but like that the voice was so loud and actually driving my behavior. And it wasn't necessarily like me connecting to my higher self. It was me being driven by the ego or the fear-based reality that I had been existing in for so long, that when there was nothing, like the void, it was like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
What is going on? Like I actually felt this moment of peace, right?
Yeah.
This pathway to peace. And a lot of that was through my yogic practice and my meditation and like finding those moments of like quiet and solitude within myself, because I like was so deeply committed to my practice that I could actually like connect with who I am inherently, not the external forces and realities that were forced upon me in my world, if that makes sense. And so judgment for me has been one of the core conditions of who I am and how I relate or don't relate to other people, because I am constantly in criticism.
Yeah, I can relate to that myself. I think the first step in any of these practices that bring more peace into our life is awareness, which is why we have that free resource of the awareness challenge, because until we become aware of the things that keep us stuck and sick, we really can't do anything about it. I also relate to the judgment of self, and how that manifests for me is typically when I'm in the harshest judgment of myself, I'm also in the harshest judgment of others. And so when I see myself looking with that judgmental eye or that comparison type of mindset, it's really a trigger for me to say, whoa, you know, where am I not giving myself grace? Where am I pushing myself too hard? Because that is showing up for me in a way that I'm now creating a bunch of shoulds for other people. Well, that's how they should behave. That's how they should do something. Well, actually, it's not. They should do what they feel like is best for them and their family and their life. That is not my role or my place to, scrutinize. And I don't want anybody else to do that to me.
Right.
This area of the country, we're in the Bible Belt right now, and there is so much of, oh, bless her heart, bless your heart. And that is a condescending, judgmental, like superiority type of thing. And I've experienced that, and it doesn't feel good. So when we're looking at other people and judging them, like, we just have to remind ourselves what that feels like on the receiving end.
Right. One of the practices, I guess, around judgment that really opened up my awareness to it was this concept of worldview, right? Like, I don't know where you came from, or like what your incomplete story is that allowed you to make manifest the actions, reactions, and behaviors that you're having today. And so instead of judging, like, how do we move into curiosity?
Yeah.
Right? And ask questions around why things are showing up for people instead of coming to the conclusion. Now, that's not always the case, right? Like, I was a kid, and maybe even still today, like, I judge myself and my body, right? Because of what we're seeing in society. Like, I'm not blonde, I'm not 5'6" at all. Like, I'm super tall. Like, I don't have like a really thin like body or appearance. And so we're looking at those things, and like, I can't be curious to a mannequin of like why you're showing up, but I can start to reflect curiously, like, why is that important for me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Curiosity is a great place when it comes to judgment, especially of ourselves. When we start noticing that voice in our head.
Yeah.
I see you. What are you trying to tell me?
What are you asking for?
Yeah.
What are you asking for? Where are you coming from? And is this a belief? And I like a belief that I want to continue to hold on to.
Right.
And a lot of times I think we make true with a capital T, right? There's truth with a little t, like there's some truth to it, but not true with a capital T. Like, we make our beliefs true with a capital T without ever being in question of like, why do I believe this?
Right. Or do I believe this? Or was this just like told to me?
Right.
That I'm supposed to believe this? Or
right.
that this is how you should be? That's a really good point.
Right. And so when we look at world beliefs and actually look at, like, if I put my feet in somebody else's shoes, for example, like, how could this be their truth? Like, why is this their truth? Can I understand and have compassion for the truth that they're existing in? Right. And so those conditions or outputs from others, like, they have nothing to do with us at the end of the day, except to show us something within ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So if we look at judgment, and I think we started talking about this, but as a mirror, for where our own work gets to be, right now, all of a sudden it becomes tool, and it becomes empowering, and it becomes like a place of curiosity that we get to expand and explore into, instead of making that thing our reality.
Right. Yeah. So when I think about some of the times I've been the harshest critic of myself, like being on stage, or emceeing an event, or giving a presentation, I can really beat myself up after stuff like that. Like, oh, I really wanted to say this and I didn't say this. When we are channeling our authentic voice, our authenticity, when we are in the fullest expression of our being, and then we get back into our egoic mind, it can make us very fearful and judgmental. Oh, you said that. Somebody's not going to like that. They're going to judge you for that. And typically in those times, I feel like I get the most positive feedback externally. Like, that spoke to someone. So, or they really related to that. And just some of the most positive feedback I've gotten. And so the lesson for me in that is, when I'm actually, speaking my truth and being in my authenticity, that is then shared. It's not up to me what someone else does with what I say. It's not my business if they judge me. It's not my business if it is wonderful for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I just get to be myself, and then that's the end of the story.
Right.
Like, nothing more has to come of it, good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. It's, how do you get you out of you?
Right.
Like, get out of your own damn way.
Yep.
At the end of the day. And I mean, I had a similar experience. Like, even the 5 years I was teaching for Hint, right? It's like the first year I'd get on and I'd be sweating every single time and like go and like hide afterwards and like, oh my God, did people get this? Did it land? Did it make a difference? All of the things. And even my last presentation that I did, it was like I had my deck done, but I didn't really know what I was saying. And it was like, okay, source, like,
speak through me.
Speak through me. Because I got the invitation, so somebody knows I have the knowledge. And then I leave the stage and they're like, this was one of the best presentations I've seen. And people are coming up and validating and, like you said, like giving feedback. And granted, not everybody in the room did, so probably didn't land for some people, but the ones that did actually like came forward, which, kind of plays into this conversation that we were having around gratitude and like letting people know, because it's not easy to be in your authentic self when the world is constantly challenging you to do things a certain way and to stay in this lane. And like, we're coloring outside of the lines here, people, like being in our sovereign, authentic voice sometimes. Yep. And so how do we hold space for people that are doing that and like, challenging the norm and lowering their inhibitions and like going out there and being the fullest expression of ourselves. And like you were saying in the beginning, like sometimes it's easy to be in judgment of that because inherently there's a knowing of like, oh crap, I want that too.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something and actually reminded me of something that my voice coach used to tell me. It is extremely difficult to be ourselves in public. It is so hard and takes so much practice to be our true self when other people are watching. And it is even with ourself watching.
Right. Right. Well, again, because there's this inner critic that's been developed throughout our lives that has like been teaching us like the norms, whatever that might be. Like, but is there really a normal?
Right.
Like who's to say that these are the rules? And I think that while religion served a purpose in some ways, it allowed for people to like release shame and fear and all that kind of stuff. It also condemned the crap out of people and like forced them into rules, regulations, beliefs, norms that maybe weren't so serving. And I think that as we think about, the new world order that's coming through, or even like the evolution of humanity right now, like we're seeing a lot of people start to color out of the lines. We're seeing a lot of the systems start to break. And we're seeing a lot of people forging new paths for humanity. And that takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
And it's so easy to judge people who are doing things you've never seen before because it's unfamiliar to us.
Right. And most of the people that have done great things and forged new pathways met a lot of criticism and a lot of judgment while they were doing it, but they kept pushing on. They kept moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's going back to what I said about the times where I've been most critical of myself, I've received positive feedback. I've also done really crappy presentations that deserved no positive feedback. And guess what? I survived.
Yeah.
And so did everyone else that had to watch it. You know what I mean? We can't expect perfection all the time. We're going to mess up, especially when we're trying something new. And sometimes that's the lesson. Like if I go unprepared into a presentation, it's probably not going to be really good.
Yeah.
Or maybe it will. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, we don't know. And I think like you were saying, like this concept of perfection and like holding this gold standard for everybody to meet is like unrealistic. Like we are all perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
And we're all doing the best that we can. We're all here. Like we are in Earth School. We're here to learn.
Yeah.
We're here to learn, to grow, evolve, love, find compassion, like be empathetic. And so when we aren't doing those things, this is where judgment starts to kick in.
Yeah. And I think it has to start with yourself. You have to start by showing yourself grace and compassion and getting rid of that judgment of self to be able to extend that to other people.
Right. And just like anything else, like it's not like one day we wake up and it's like, hey, I live in a judgment-free zone, right? Again, like I've been going through a huge grief portal and I'm like in judgment of myself, like I should be over the shit already.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like giving myself a hard time. And sometimes it's like, it's beneficial in some ways in regards to like, it moves me out of procrastination or like stagnancy or some of those things. Like sometimes it's actually a little bit of a tool for me to like give myself a swift kick in the ass to move forward. And other times it's not serving. And so it's like, how do I use this time to be in grief and sorrow, to like acknowledge those things so that I'm not stuffing them down or making myself wrong for them, because now all of a sudden when I bring judgment to it, it's like me defining that that's part of me.
Yeah, an attachment to it.
Right, instead of being in self-acceptance. And again, like inherently, like if we think back to our early ancestors and, you know, the cavemen, like we're tribal by nature. We want to belong. We want to be accepted. And part of that starts by like accepting ourselves. Yeah. Accepting who we are, you know, in each and every moment, and extending that same level of compassion, like you're saying, from ourselves out to the people in the world.
Yeah. I can't remember where I heard this, but I feel like it's relevant. I think it was Gandhi that was in some type of seminar, and the Westerners were talking about how they didn't love themselves, and he couldn't understand that. And even the Bible, like, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But we've come so far from a time when we loved ourselves,
right?
Which is why I think it's so easy for us to judge other people. And so that, like, talk about a contemplation, that's a deep one.
Yeah.
How do we get to the place where we love ourselves so that we're capable of loving others? How do we get to the place where we're not in judgment of ourselves so we're capable of not judging others? That to me is the practice.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say even less of a question of how and more of a question of like becoming.
Yeah.
You know, like, how do we be the love? How do we be the compassion in these moments where we're finding ourselves met with judgment or criticism? Like, you know, and going back to our boy Gandhi, it's like, yeah, we get to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Yep.
And so, you know, if we think of this concept of judgment as being the mirror, it's like going back to like, as within, so without, right? One finger at you, three at me. Like whatever's happening on the external, we can actually start to take and claim radical responsibility for what we're seeing, feeling, and believing if we look internally.
Yeah. And what a place of empowerment versus, you know, victim.
Right? We get to be the own hero of our stories. And so again, like, this isn't for you all to like bring awareness to judgment. Yes, right? But not to like criticize and belittle yourself for being judging, because guess what? We're human. And again, it's how we contextualize the reality around us. It's like, that thing is green. For you, it may be light green, you know, like, neither one of us are wrong. It's our perspective. Right. It's our reality. Right. And so instead of being like, she's always wrong, she always sees this the wrong way, it's like, oh, maybe it could be light green in some time, space, or reality, or through the lens in which you're looking. And so as we start to like soften and like be like, oh, there might be many ways to look at this thing, there might be many ways to do life, like the judgment starts to fall away, and all of a sudden we can show up in the truest, more authentic version of ourselves.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Like, we can both, I think that a lot of judgment comes from wanting to be right. And both things can be true. Again, both things can be true. You can believe that, and I can believe this, and that's okay. And doesn't mean we don't have to get along about it.
Right.
Totally.
And I could say no right now.
And it's an attachment, right? But that's an attachment too.
Attachment to what?
It's an attachment to the belief. Like if I'm attached to the belief that I am right about this and you are wrong, that's when anger and fear and all of those things come up. But why does my experience have to be your experience? You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's where that judgment is coming from. I'm saying I'm doing it right and you're doing it wrong.
Right. Which is a play on superiority, which, I mean, is part of like the patriarchal society that we live in.
Right.
And so if we move out of that, it's like we just come into this place of like isness. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Yep.
And if we can allow that to roll off of our backs and not be in judgment, like all of a sudden we're finding a little bit more grace and again, compassion and care for one another, because at the end of the day, like we're all in this together, this crazy life experience. And so why make somebody wrong for who they're being and what they believe, even if it feels extreme? And sometimes like it's hard not to be in judgment of some things, especially when you've got hardcore beliefs around, it's like the flat earthers. Like, do you believe the earth is flat or do you believe it's round? Like, who cares at the end of the day? We may never know the answer to this question.
Right.
And so am I more attached to being right, or am I open to like being like, hey, maybe these things can simultaneously exist? And is it affecting me every single day? Like, well, in my personal context, no.
Right.
Like I'm here to support humanity into living in their empowered lives, right? It's like, so if you want to believe the earth is flat, like let's get curious.
Yeah. Curious. That's the word. I was just going to say, like, if we look at other people and the things that they like believe and they're like super attached to their belief, like, tell me more about that. That's really interesting. I mean, I am a curious person. I have so many questions about so many things. I want to know what you think and why.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's what makes the world interesting.
Yeah. And that's what we're here to be in the fullest experience of all of the emotions and all of the expressions. And so judgment is almost like where our limitations start to show up, right? They're self-imposed limitations, and part of them are inherited through different beliefs and systems and infrastructures that we've grown up in or have been exposed to. But ultimately, like, how do we get to use them as our teachers so that we can start to be in question and curiosity of our own lives?
Yeah. And so a practice, to I guess put that into action, because it's really difficult to become aware of all the areas in which we are judging, especially when we are in that.
Sure.
So one of the things that I like to do is jot down, either in a note on my phone or, in my journal, like, what are some of the things that I noticed myself being really judgmental about? What am I observing that's making me feel that kind of, whether it be jealousy judgment or whether it be like disgust judgment, like, because they're both forms of judgment. And what am I either like refusing to see in my own experience that I need to be aware of, so that I'm like, that's playing out for me and someone else.
Yeah.
And or what am I seeing in someone else that I'm jealous of or envious of, that I see because I'm capable of that, or I want that for myself. And how do I, instead of looking at them and what they're doing, how do I bring more of that into my own life?
Yeah.
That's what I actually want.
Do you have an example of that?
About the envious or the jealousy?
I mean, any
thing?
of them, but really just like how judgment's alive for you even today. Like, even having awareness, like, it's still alive, right? It shows itself through glimpses of our experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I have a ton of examples, but specifically, since I was just talking about being jealous or envious, I think a lot of times I see other people living experiences that I'm like, I can do that. Why am I not doing? Why am I not the one that's doing that? And either being like, that makes me feel small, like, oh, I can't do that because somebody else already has done it, or that makes me feel jealous, like they're not that good. I would do way better if I was doing it. Well, guess what? I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And they are. So I mean, that's one of the biggest ones for me. Like, when I see myself being like, ooh, I could do that way better. I'm like, but I'm not. I'm not doing it. I haven't put myself out there in that way.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here on my high horse saying all the things that they're doing wrong, or they're not doing as good as I would.
Yeah.
It's really easy to do that when you're not putting yourself out there yourself.
Yeah, it brings me back. One of my friends, Tig, who I did my coach training with, would I used to have, like, I have a lot of self-doubt, right? Which just comes from judgment. And he'd say to me, he's like, Lauren, people are going to judge you whether you're living your best life or you're living somebody else's. You might as well live your damn best life.
Yeah, true.
Right? And so it's like, again, like, okay, if that's really the case, if we're in judgment and I'm under a microscope, and again, I started by sharing with you, like, being a father who's a judge, like, literally, there's a lot of judgment in my space. And why would I live anything other than what my heart wants to express? And so how do I tap into that? And again, if we're using judgment as a tool or a resource to point us, like, really practice some curiosity with yourself, and compassion too, because it doesn't go away. Like, none of these, we're human. We're going to have the experience of all of these emotions. And so let it be energy in motion, like, oh, I see you jealousy, or, oh, I see you judgment, or whatever it is, and say, what is it that's showing up in me that I'm insecure about, or maybe I have fear around, and how does this allow me to be pointed in the direction of my next steps?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So reflect. I mean, this is all a practice of self-awareness and deeper reflection so that we can ask questions that live us to live into our highest potential at the end of the day.
If you've been listening along, you have heard me talk about the 7-day free awareness challenge that we have right now on our website and linked in the show notes. This is a workbook that offers a structured and gentle approach to cultivating mindfulness and self-awareness. So if you've never engaged in any of these practices before, this is a great place to start and kind of dip your toe in the water in a lot of different practices and modalities to help bring about more awareness. So each day, participants are introduced to a different practice, such as recognizing the power of choice, observing thoughts, and deepening awareness of emotions. This awareness challenge was designed to help us peel back the layers of societal conditioning and challenge participants to discover some of the hidden aspects of themselves that influence their daily lives. Activities include journaling prompts, reflection exercises, and mindfulness techniques that foster a deeper connection with the present moment. By completing the challenge, participants are going to identify patterns and be able to let go of some self-limiting beliefs and embrace a more peaceful and intentional way of living. If you have not yet downloaded the workbook, we hope you check it out and join us on this 7-day awareness challenge. Thank you so much for being here today with us. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, you can find the links to any of the resources we discussed in today's podcast in the show notes. And if you want to connect with us further, please find us on Instagram at The Zen Curious, or you can leave us a comment or review. We'll see you next week.